It's a story about two women, one in the present day with a very recent past and one in the 20s, 30s, 40s and beyond.
I loved the way the script flip-flopped between a modern-day story and a period story, and that the two kind of mirrored each other and kept pace with each other.
Definitely M's process in the beginning was very much about, you know, reading, education, learning, absorbing this world.
To create this look of this film, we read tons of books, saw tons of pictures, and of course a lot of blueprints of other films.
There are books that Madonna used when she was writing the script, books of the letters, and they're amazing, they're just fascinating.
It's refreshing to read a script that has such strong, interesting female characters at its centre.
I think it's unquestionable that the film is female strong in the sense that the leads are both female and that the director's female.
Okay, ladies, are you ready? Perfect.
Good.
Check the gate.
What I liked about the script was the way that it was written. It kept the period flashbacks very real, very honest, very immediate.
Seeing an historical figure through the eyes of a modern-day woman, and then on the flip side, being able to relate to a woman in the late 1930s who was about to potentially become a queen.
I thought it was a very fascinating take on a very interesting chapter in the British monarchy's history and a very human quest for true love.
There's always certain things that attract you to a film, you know, the story, the character, the creative team. So for me, the story, you know, about the search for love, about the journey of one's soul, I think is a beautiful tale to tell.
I was always fascinated by the story of the Duke and the Duchess. Every time I'd go out to dinner, I'd bring up their name at a dinner party, and it would be like throwing a Molotov cocktail onto the table. Suddenly, the table would erupt, and everyone would get into an argument about who they were. As I read their story, my feelings toward them kept changing. One minute, I was, you know, enthralled and swept up in it, and then the next minute, I was kind of irritated with them and thinking of them as superficial. And then the next minute, I thought, oh my God, they're human beings like all of us. This guy gave up the throne. What drove him to do that? If it was for a woman and if it was for love, what did this woman have?
The role that I play in the film is the role of Edward, or David to his family, or the Prince of Wales, then the King to the general public, or then the Duke of Windsor. He had several different names in his life, but I suppose most famous now for being the man who abdicated the throne in the 20th century. One thing that is for sure is that Edward was one of the greatest celebrities. I mean, this is the beginning of celebritydom. He was absolutely worshipped, adored, fawned over. He was a major, major sex symbol. In fact, if you mentioned his name to my grandmother, she'd have to sit down. What I think must be true is that he was madly in love with her. Maybe desperately in love with her. If you've given up the empire for somebody, then, God, that better be the right person.
Casting Wallis Simpson was almost impossible because she's so specific. Her persona, her energy, her, you know, the way she spoke, the way she held herself. When Andrea Riseborough walked in the room, I immediately knew she was the one. When I spoke to various people about meeting her, they all said, oh no, she's too young. But the great thing about Andrea is that she has a face that can play a range of ages and a range of emotion. And I found working with her extraordinary.
I'm playing Wallis from 28 to 70. So, you know, you get a lot of the 70, but what was she when she was younger? Well, you see like real sort of, you see cine footage of her getting on and off boats and her and Edward together and not being relaxed. And the interesting thing is what happens when you imagine what they're like Just those two, just we two in a private space. To my grandma, she was just this sort of American woman who'd taken away this king who was the first king really to fight for the common man. I just remember thinking that her spirit must have been such that she was compelling enough that he needed to be with her. It's a story about a person who loved another person enough to devote their entire life to making them happy. What we weren't interested in doing is just recreating Wallis Simpson. We were interested in how she was useful to Abbie's character, really, to Wally's character. Wally and Wallis have an extraordinary relationship in the sense that Wally's obsessed with the idea of Wallis's life and how perfect this ideal love seemed to be that she had with Edward.
This is Wally's imagination of what she thinks their relationship might have been like.
One of the reasons I cast Abbie was because there's a strength about her as an actress when she doesn't say anything.
Carrying her whole story and to be able to embody that and give it more than 100%, you know, I felt it did really consume me and still is consuming me.
It was important for me to create a character that was also trapped in a relationship that was not rooted in love. Because she married for security, she's longing for love. And a lot of people marry for love and they're longing for security. So this is the conundrum.
Wally's in her late 20s in an unhappy marriage. She lives in New York in the late 90s and is in the process of figuring out what she wants to do with the rest of her life.
In many ways, Wally doesn't have a voice. She's much more of a voyeur that goes through life, living vicariously through objects and through the Duchess. I decided to use the items from the auction as a device to go back and forth in time. From a martini shaker to a pillbox, a beautiful linen tablecloth, because each item, I felt, told a story. She goes on this journey thinking it was the greatest love story, and oh my God, how could this man give up such a powerful position, only to realize that it wasn't such a perfect love.
She's been living in an environment that's so kind of dark and suppressed. They've been married for about 6 years. They want to have a child. She's given up her job to focus on having a baby, and as that becomes more imminent, things really start to fall apart.
They are, to all intents and purposes, a celebrated society couple. He is a very successful, hotshot child psychiatrist. They live in a beautiful apartment in the Upper West Side, and they have it all. So it seems, but actually they don't have it all. They have a lot of issues. He can't deal with her independent spirit, her needs. She's stuck inside this fabulous apartment that has no joy and no love. She's looking for an escape. She needs a fantasy.
When she meets Evgeny, their friendship is just so open and so free. They're almost like two kids. They just speak their minds to each other.
I play Evgeny Kolpakov, who is a Ukrainian immigrant. He's working as a security guard in Sotheby's.
Evgeny and Wally are both lost souls when they find each other. They're both, you know, he's in a kind of mourning. He's lost his wife. I don't think he's terribly challenged or happy about the job he has, and she's not happy either, and they find each other.
When I first read the script, what I liked the most about the character was there's a mysterious quality to him, and his sense of humor is very dry, so you're never really sure where you stand with him. He's actually a pianist and a sensitive artist, and ends up falling in love with Wally. The scenes are very intimate and all about two people who immediately are just comfortable together, and particularly Abbie. I don't know anyone that's quite as comfortable in their skin as she is, you know, just completely always at ease. And that was just invaluable.